Welcome back. I'm Brian Downs and this is Prosex Studio. On this channel, we discuss the sexual messages in films and television shows and determine whether they are presenting a positive or negative view of sex. Let's take a look at 1984's Ghostbusters. We're only 3 minutes into the film when we meet Dr. Peter Venkman, one of the greatest comedic characters in the history of art, as rendered by the immortal Bill Murray. "Burn in hell, Venkman" is scrawled on the door of the paranormal studies laboratory in the university basement, giving us a hint that he's something of a rogue. What's he doing in there? He's pretending to study the effects of negative reinforcement on ESP ability by asking 2 student volunteers to guess what shapes are printed on the backs of paper cards. Whatever the mealy guy, Stephen Tash, guesses, Venkman gives him the electric zap. Whatever the beautiful blonde Jennifer Runyon, guesses, Venkman tells her that she's right. She's a legitimate phenomenon. They're interrupted when Ray Stantz, Dan Aykroyd, rushes in to report a ghost sighting at the New York Public Library. Venkman suggests to Jennifer that she come back to the lab that night at 8 o'clock. He wants to do more research on her. Jennifer seems receptive to this idea, but we never actually see her agree to nor attend that later meeting. She disappears. We'll never see her again. In fact, Dr. Stantz doesn't speak to Jennifer when he comes in the room or interact with her in any way. Dr. Stantz never sees the mealy guy either. Could it be that the student volunteers are Ghostbusters' first ghosts? But to keep to my point, how does the film show us Venkman's roguish bad boy character? By showing us that he's interested in sex. Your problem is sex. This is one of the 12 negative memes that pop culture and movies recycle endlessly. If a protagonist has sex, is interested in sex, pursues sex, that's presented as their problem, as their character flaw, as something they need to overcome or stop doing or get rid of. That's what's happening here. That's why Jennifer is in this film, to demonstrate what's wrong, charmingly, impishly wrong, with Venkman. And as I said, we never see Jennifer again. Venkman doesn't get so much as a kiss. He's just shown to be flawed for wanting one. A few minutes later, Venkman, Stantz, and Egon are down at the library, questioning a gray-haired librarian who saw the ghost. In one of the film's most famous lines, Venkman asks her, "Are you, Alice, menstruating right now?" One of the other library staff asks him, "What has that got to do with it?" To which Venkman replies, "Back off, man. I'm a scientist." Menstruation is a symptom of sexuality, so of course the film's one reference to it is used to reinforce Venkman's comedic roguishness. The question never gets answered nor referenced again. A few minutes later, Stantz and Egon push Venkman forward to speak to the ghost that is hovering in the lower levels of the vast library. "Hello, I'm Peter. Where are you from? Originally." When this gets no useful reaction, Venkman reports, "Okay, the usual stuff isn't working." This is a very funny moment, but it's just hitting the message again. Venkman is not a serious person. He's a dodger. He's a hustler. We know that because he's the only character so far to reference or pursue sex. He's also the guy who's most motivated by wealth to become a Ghostbuster. Now we're going to meet Dana Barrett, the legendary Sigourney Weaver, who will soon be swept up in the supernatural goings-on. She's an attractive woman in her mid-30s, a professional violinist who plays in the orchestra. She's good-looking, accomplished, talented, and single. Why? Because serious people don't sex, another one of the negative memes. We're supposed to take Dana seriously and respect her, therefore she's got to be single. No sex life for her. We first see her in the hallway of her luxurious apartment building where she's being pestered by her neighbor, Louis Tully, played by Rick Moranis. Tully is obviously attracted to her and she is obviously not interested. What's the first thing the film wants us to know about Dana? That Dana rejects the interest of men. Dana Barrett is admirable because she has no sexual relationship and she rejects the possibility of one with Louis. Now, we understand why Dana isn't interested. Louis is very off-putting, but this is the story that the film chooses to tell. The only interest she gets is the sort of interest she needs to turn down. And look at Louis. He's a CPA who does well enough to live in that beautiful high-rise, and he takes care with his health and fitness. He would be an attractive man, except that the movie makes him a capering weirdo. And it's the weirdo who pursues sex. Your problem is sex. What's wrong with Lewis? Well, a few things, but one of the big things is that he's attracted to Dana. Dana shortly has a terrifying supernatural experience in her kitchen and seeks the help of the newest business in town, the Ghostbusters. The instant she walks in, it's obvious that Venkman is attracted to her. His problem is still sex. And this should be its own meme, by the way. I should work this out as its own entry. Movies and television will often present a very attractive character, like this well-off, statuesque violinist, and then tell the audience that any other character who is attracted to them is an idiot for being attracted to a very attractive person. Venkman and Dana go to her apartment where Venkman pretends to investigate, but his real motive is to make a pass at her. She rejects his clumsy move with obvious annoyance and throws him out. You're more like a game show host. You are so odd. Will you please leave? Serious people don't sex. And after she rejects Venkman, her ghost problem dematerializes. And this is where things start to get very, very anti-sex. Some weeks go by in which the Ghostbusters are doing a lot of business and gaining a lot of attention. Ghost activity is ominously on the rise. Meanwhile, Dana is living cheerfully in her apartment, untroubled by or about any ghost or beastie. Then we have a scene where Venkman waits for her outside of rehearsal so that he can report what their research has found about her case, which is that Zool, the entity that her refrigerator mentioned, was worshipped in ancient Sumeria. Venkman also takes this opportunity to flirt with Dana again and ask her to dinner on Thursday night, on the polite fiction of discussing supernatural matters. We can see that she is warming to him and she accepts his invitation. It looks like she might be considering having some sex. In the very next scene in which Dana appears, it is Thursday night. She's returning to her apartment to prepare for her date and possible sexual encounter with Venkman. She goes into her apartment. She takes her pants off, leaving her in the skin-tight leggings she was wearing underneath. She takes a brief call from her mother, but begs off quickly, telling her that she has a date. Her last significant dialogue is a reference to the sexual encounter she might be having later. Then 3 demonic hands tear out of the upholstery of the chair in which she is sitting. One goes over her mouth, one lands on her breast, the last sprouts out of the seat between her legs and pins her thigh in place. Are you following this? She was considering a sexual encounter with Venkman. She was preparing for the date that's maybe an hour in the future, and whammo, she's assaulted by a devil dog, seizing her by the thighs. The interdimensional cross rip is now underway. I guess that's what you get for thinking about sharing your vagina. Remember, before she was considering a sexual encounter, she had very little supernatural trouble, and as soon as she accepts a date with Venkman, bam, possessed. This is the wanting disaster, the most common of the memes about sexuality. The idea that anyone who wants sex, is interested in sex, pursues sex, has sex, suffers some catastrophe immediately following. In the very next scene, Venkman arrives for the date. He is surprised to find Dana dressed in a very sexy way and also possessed by an ancient Sumerian god. She asks him if he is the keymaster and he says no, so she slams the door in his face. He knocks again and introduces himself as a friend of the keymaster. Dana's body introduces herself as Zool, the gatekeeper. Zool is preparing for the coming of Gozer, the destructor. And Zool, in Dana's body, lies down on Dana's bed, commences panting and writhing, and asks, "Do you want this body? Take me now, sub-creature." So, Dana was to be admired when she showed no sexual interest in either Venkman or Tully, and why would she? They're clowns. Then Dana warmed to Venkman, accepted his invitation to a date, got groped by at least one devil dog, and got possessed by an evil and ancient god. And what does Zool want to do while occupying Dana's very attractive body? Have sex. It's villains who sex, another negative meme. How can you tell who the bad people are, who the evil people are, or entities in this case? They're interested in sex. Villains are shameless about their sex lives. What possible reason could Zool have for wanting sex with Venkman? No practical reason at all, but Zool is bad and sex is bad, so there you go. And this is Venkman's epic moment. This is where Peter Venkman transforms from class clown to hero who will battle to save the world. Because this is where Venkman declines to have sex with Dana's body. It is when Venkman turns down this opportunity that he becomes a real protagonist. From here on out, he'll just be saving the world at great personal risk. He literally responds to Zool's aggressive come-ons by saying, "Why don't you just stop trying to upset and disturb Dr. Venkman?" The sexual interest he's previously been seeking is now upsetting and disturbing, because serious people don't sex, people who have responsibilities and stuff. Yes, of course, this encounter with the monstrous entity from Sumeria is upsetting and disturbing, but remember, this is the story they are choosing to tell. The story could have been that Venkman and Dana met and fell into a passionate sexual relationship, then the two of them discover an occult conspiracy that threatens to destroy the world, they defeat it together with the help of the other paranormal eliminators, and go back to doing it. But that is not the story Ghostbusters chooses to tell. So, Walter Peck and the Environmental Protection Agency show up and shut off the ghost containment facility, which sprays captive ghosts across the island. This dovetails with the Zool situation, and now the end is nigh. By the way, Louis Tully, the weirdo neighbor, also had his genitals attacked by a devil dog. He is now the keymaster. Dana Barrett is the gatekeeper. Tully seeks her out at the top of the high-rise that turns out to have been designed and built by a lunatic sorcerer for purposes just like this one, and they embrace with a passionate kiss. The camera cuts away, but it's implied that keys fit nicely into gates. Again, Dana Barrett had no sex. Zool, though, having seized control of her body, can't seem to get enough because sex seems to be how Zool brings about the end of the world. This is the negative meme. Danger is sex. Sex is presented as dangerous, sinister, full of risk, or vice versa. Danger is presented as sexy, but it's all designed to make it off-putting and anxiety-inducing. Dr. Stantz, by the way, is the silly guy who crosses his eyes and falls out of bed when he has an erotic dream featuring a ghost. Janine, the Ghostbusters receptionist, shows interest in and affection for Egon, but that's played for awkward laughs. She's weird for being interested and he's stiff, not like that, and ungrateful in his disinterest. So, the team is off to save the girl, the world, and the Big Apple. Guess what form Gozer takes when they first encounter it? It can be anything it wants to be. But it presents as a statuesque and athletic woman with magnificent cheekbones and smoky eye makeup because danger is sex. Spoiler alert, our heroes defeat the interdimensional menace, and Venkman and Dana share a kiss in front of a cheering crowd of New Yorkers. Other than that one moment, Ghostbusters presents sex and interest in sex as foolish clown play at best and an expression of ultimate evil at worst. While celibacy is presented to be admired as the way you prevent reality from dissolving in the clutches of an evil and terrible god. Ghostbusters is, very clearly, anti-sex, with the exception of one kiss. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. It's a big help to the channel, and it will help you come back next week for more analysis of this kind on another film or television show. Check out my existing videos. There's a number of them on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and other well-known intellectual properties. I'm Brian Downs. I hope to see you again.